Hello there. This is Jen T. Grace. I'm the founder of Publish Your Purpose and the founder of the Institute for Author Growth and Impact. And I'm here for another episode of Purpose Beyond the Page. And today we're talking about the book as a vehicle, turning our expertise into actionable impact. And I have a number of different things that I want to discuss with you today, Daniel. And so welcome first to the show. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jen, for having me.
Yeah, there's like so many things that I feel like we can really unpack today that I think they are going to be valuable. But before we get there, I want you to just kind of take a moment to kind of introduce who you are and basically how you show up in the world and who you're serving.
Absolutely. Yeah. So founder and CEO of CoLabL, been around. We're actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary. Which is exciting. It's an exciting milestone. But our primary work is to support early career talent ages 18 to 30 as they're transitioning from school into career. And then about 25% of our work is in support of people managers who are supporting that early career talent. So setting them up for success, both as managers, but also as coaches every day, helping people unlock their opportunities for growth. And, excited to be here. This is, an opportunity for me to sort of share the journey that I've been on. I've written 2 books so far that have been, I would say, key tools to a lot of the training experiences, the mentorship programs that we facilitate through CoLabL. So excited to share lessons and reflections on that journey with you and your listeners.
Yeah, I love that. So do you want to kind of share just a little bit more about the book? Because I know you also have a third book that's kind of percolating. So do you want to kind of just share a little bit about that first?
Yeah, totally. So my first book I wrote was really, I always say it's a passion project. So my grandmother, she passed away when she was 96 years old. And when she passed, I took several weeks off of work and wrote that book. And it was really an opportunity for me to sort of honor her. She was somebody who always encouraged me to lean into my writing as a form of expression and just sort of reflection on my own journey. And so funny story is like, I spent about a week and a half writing the very first draft and got to the end of that week and a half and kind of realized that like, I really wasn't writing from my heart. I was writing because I was like trying to pretend to sort of, I think, be something that I wasn't at that point, like finding the perfect words to put out on the page. And so I sort of scrapped. I remember deleting that entire first draft and be like, all right, blank page at a coffee shop. I'm starting over. Yeah. And I just wrote from my heart, almost as if I was writing a journal about my experience. And the title of the book was Tell Me I Can't and I Will. And it very much documents kind of the experience I had as a young leader. I was 18 when I started a nonprofit in Pittsburgh, where I'm from originally. And I really wanted to encourage people who had been told they could not do something or they shouldn't pursue a passion or something they identified as a purpose. I wanted that book to be kind of a testament to leverage the light within and bring it to the world, no matter what it takes. So that was kind of the first book that I put out, like I mentioned, as a passion project. I was working with a lot of young leaders. So it was a great tool for me to put into their hands and encourage them to reference it outside of our training experiences and mentorship programs and all that. The second book I wrote, which is called We Got This, is my more recent book I just published at the beginning of this year. And it really was a collection of 25 years of working with young leaders and early career talent. And it's like, I've learned all these things from lots of other people at different stages of their careers and different industries and geographies around the world. And it's like, how do I put all of these things that I incorporate into our training into a book that I can then share with people in our programs and beyond to really scale the impact and give people more of a pocket guide, if you will, for quick references to tools and frameworks that they could plug into their everyday living.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And when you were working on the second book, what did you take from your experience of the first one from a writing standpoint, out of curiosity?
It's a really funny, that's also a funny story. So I had my second book on my sort of vision board for about 2 years. And I was sort of beating myself up at the end of last year because I had not yet gone through the process of fully writing it. But I had outlines. So I like travel a lot for work. And so I always find this sort of creative energy flows when I'm on planes. And so I had everything outlined. I had the chapters all, put together and all that. But I said, you know what I need to do? I need to just book myself a writing retreat. So I had been in Halifax in Canada for work. And I remember like it was the first time I'd ever been there. And I remember being in the hotel saying like, I want to write my next book here. There was just an energy in the space. I made friends with the people, at the front desk at a local coffee shop. And so I booked 5 days and I went there, just heads down, phone on Do Not Disturb, and just like cranked it out. And I will say that really worked for me because it gave me the focus that I needed to sort of put pen to paper to make it come to life.
Wow. And when you were writing that first one and you were like, I got to scrap the first draft because I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. I assume you did not make that same mistake as you were kind of like isolating yourself in that room for 5 days.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, totally. I think and that's a lot of what I cover in like speaking engagements and things. It's like, we all have this pressure, I think, sometimes to perform in the sort of the light of someone else's definition of success. Mm-hmm. And I think that, my books and like what I try to live every day is, let's just be ourselves and not focus so much on quote unquote perfection, but just showing up authentically and really reflecting on the progress that we're making day after day, year after year. And we'll all be in a much better space. And so that's kind of like what works best for me in this book, was just sort of saying, what do I normally tell people when I'm one-on-one in coaching or in training sessions? How do I just translate that into a book and keep it super tactical, super focused from chapter to chapter?
Mm-hmm. And when we look at authenticity over performance, right? Because that's really what you're saying here. How does that show up for somebody? Like, so if somebody's like really struggling, because I know for me, working with people who are thought leaders and they're working on books and, maybe they already have books out, maybe they're still working on it. Like, there is such a hurdle that people have to overcome from that visibility standpoint, where they feel comfortable showing up in different and or elevated ways. So, and I feel like authenticity it's an overused word, and it's overused because it's so important and so foundational to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's almost like it can come down to write the book that you needed, right? Like, if you were to rewind in time and ask yourself, like, what would be the resource that would have helped me, accelerate myself on the journey that I've been on, or give me the insight that I needed earlier? Like, literally, and that's honestly what I did in this, particularly with the second book, is I wrote it as if I was writing it to myself 25 years ago. Like, if I was just at the starting point of my career, what are the things that I've learned that I wish somebody would have told me or showed me earlier? And I think, to me, that's what authenticity is. It's like, not necessarily having to find the perfect words, but just speaking in the sort of same language, using the same examples that you would if you were having coffee with a friend who was asking for your advice.
Yeah, I think that's such valid advice. And I think if I go back in time to, I don't know, maybe 2010, 8, 9, somewhere in that range, where kind of internet marketing, I feel like, was at its kind of like peak of perfectionism, where everything you produced had to feel perfect. If you were podcasting, and that was like early days of podcasting, versus now, like, everybody has a podcast and it's so much easier to create one versus what it was, 15 years ago. But I feel like then, like, you had to edit out every single like or whatever the thing is that you had, versus now it's almost like we are having this pendulum swing into a completely different direction, because people are so over polished, perfect expert. Like, people don't like people aren't craving that anymore.
Yeah. And I think largely because it's like, you don't encounter those people in your day-to-day living, right? Right. So it's like, we're all like beautifully imperfect in so many ways. And so if we just lean into that and embrace each other for who we are, and, look for, especially like in today's world, like the common ground that exists between us, it gives us a really solid foundation in which we can explore the differences too. And I think the same with writing. It's like, again, you try to avoid the trap of writing for perfection or writing to someone else's definition of success. And, to your point, authenticity is nothing more than breathing life into your own values and to the things that are important to you, and just trusting that there's other people out there that are looking for what you've learned and what you have to offer.
Yeah. There's so much here. And I think of, the idea of the humble expert, which I know we kind of put in the description here, because it feels like it's such a struggle. Like, there's almost like a struggle between like authenticity and humbleness. And then obviously, like, those two things are on one side, and then being like an expert or a leader in whatever capacity that might look like, also feels very much in contrast to humbleness, even though there's a way to have it all work, which is through authenticity. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I feel like we have to take pride in what we've learned and what we've accomplished along our journey, while also remaining open to all the things that we just don't know we don't know yet. And so a lot of times, like when we're leading mentoring programs, I always say great mentorship is balancing teaching and learning. And so as an author or as a speaker or trainer, like I feel it's the same, right? Like I'm going to come in, I'm going to give you what I know from my experience and what I've researched and all that and what I've lived. And I'm going to remain open to inviting you into the conversation. And I think, you know, a great book does just that. Just like if you go to a great play and you want to talk about it afterwards, or if you go to a great training and you're like, okay, how do I apply this next? So I think that a great book is going to be an invitation to reflect, an invitation to experiment, to try new things, whether it's our mindset or, you know, specific tactics or actions that we can take, and then to share it with others and to say like, hey, these are some of the things that I learned. Here's what I'm doing with it. And here's what I'm learning in the process.
And we have to get out of our own way when it comes to, I think that that's a huge piece of, you know, putting a book out into the world, is that we have our belief of what we think people should have as takeaways from our content. And yet sometimes people come back to us and it's something that we couldn't have planned for. We could not have predicted. It's just kind of like, oh, wow, I never would have thought of my own work in that particular way. So it's almost like allowing ourselves to put our ego aside to allow a reader to come to us and say, hey, your work impacted me in this particular way, and not feel a certain way about it, not feel defensive about it, or, you know, however our ego might want to show up, because Lord knows it's always kind of ever present, trying to cause chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, Jen, it reminds me of, I don't know if they still do it, but years and years ago, there was a great museum in Pittsburgh called the Mattress Factory that had a lot of installation art. And they would bring in artists in residence. And the cool thing about the museum was you would go through it and they would often ask you in small groups to sort of reflect on what you were seeing within the installation. What do you think the artist was trying to communicate or convey? And at one point in the experience, you start to realize that the artists are actually with you. So they're like listening in to sort of understand like how you're all interpreting it and processing it. And then at some point they start to open up and share like what was their motivation and you know, what drove them to do it in the first place. And I always love that, because it's like, they're not leading with, you know, here's what you should know about this. They're leading with, what do you see? How does it make you feel? And I think the same is true for an author or a speaker. It's like, I'm gonna give you something, but I'm going to be just as curious to see what you take from it.
Yeah. And that requires you to really put your ego aside, especially when someone doesn't know that you're the creator of the thing, because, you know, there's no filter at that point. At least, you know, when someone knows you're the creator of the thing, maybe they'll pussyfoot around how they might say something.
Yeah.
But if they don't like it, they're just going to say it. And that, you know, can be a struggle for the ego to take in.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
So this makes me think of, you know, another thing we kind of had noted is around kind of like this like mindset around kind of like showing up to give. Because if we're thinking about what you were saying in terms of like you were writing the book that you wish, you know, you had, you know, when you were 18. Yeah. So often that's the case, whether it's nonfiction or a memoir, we are writing the thing that we needed at the time that we couldn't find. Yeah. And I feel like so much of that requires us to be in a mindset that is more willing and open to kind of share our experiences, because there's plenty of other people that might have some Venn diagram of shared experiences that you had, but there was something in you that decided like, I'm going to be the one that takes this on to fill the need in the marketplace because it didn't exist before. And I'm wondering, like, do you have any wisdom or thoughts of like what you think where that, I don't know, switch flips for some people to say like, I'm going to be the one that does it, versus all of the other people who think about it, but have zero interest or intention to do it?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things I'll share. One is, for me personally, I was a pretty like introverted and like quiet, shy kid, but outgoing, right? Like I would put myself in spaces, but I was not the one who was like, you know, running into a room of strangers and being like, hey, look at me, right? Like, but so something that for me was like volunteer service was like where I found myself. Mm-hmm. It's where I found a sense of purpose. I remember I started volunteering when I was 11 at a YMCA camp supporting the 6-year-olds, because both my older brothers had been working as camp counselors there. And I didn't want to be at home by myself. So I was like, hey, I'll go I'll help out. But I could have been a camper, right? And so there was something in me that was like, no, I want to go and I want to like help support the younger kids. Mm-hmm. And so I think through that, I found myself. I continued to do a lot of volunteerism through high school. And I think like writing to me is an act of service. And so I think when you talk about, giving, it's like, okay, I'm going to give you what I've learned.
Mhm.
And then again, going back to what we were saying earlier, invite you to share what you've learned so that I can keep learning, right? Like, and together we'll just get stronger. We can move faster if we are sharing this information and sharing our experiences. So I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm the one that should write the book, do it first and foremost as an act of service to say like, there's someone out there looking for your story, for insights from your lived experiences. And if you can get that book and get your thoughts into their hands or into their minds, like you can unlock something for them that accelerates them further on their path. And I think, again, just leading by giving, we often talk about like service leadership. Great managers are ones that aren't just like barking orders, but great leaders are ones that are taking the time to intentionally get to know their people. So that would be my other tip, is to like, as an author, like really think about and put yourself in the shoes of who you're trying to write this book for. And so again, for me, the last book I wrote was very much for someone who's at the starting point of their career for the most part. And so I kept asking myself after every chapter, like, did I give them something that I feel like is valuable at the starting gate? And if the answer is yes, I moved on to the next chapter.
Yeah. At any point in the process for either book, did you feel like you were giving too much away? Because I do encounter authors on a regular basis where they're concerned. I don't know if it's from an intellectual property standpoint. I don't quite know the real root of that kind of scarcity mindset almost that sometimes people come to the table with. But I'm just curious, because you are such a person who shows up in a place of like, I'm just going to give you all that I have. I'm curious if at any point it even just kind of crossed your mind of like, oh, am I giving too much?
It didn't cross my mind, but that's the feedback I frankly have gotten most of my career. So I will say, like, a lot of times, like when I had mentors, for example, when I was early on, like developing my training programs and things, a lot of times, like people would say things to me like, oh, you're giving them like 10 things, give them one thing and then put a paywall to get the other 9. And I remember, this was a while ago, but I remember like there was all these schemes online to like, you were host these like free webinars, and then like the free webinar was essentially an hour of just selling to get you to buy something at the end, but never really delivering great value. And I remember getting caught in those and just being like, I never want to do this. So to me, it was like, if I'm going to write a book, I'm going to give you it all in the book, but I can bring it to life through my training programs. I can bring it to, breathe life into it differently through mentorship coaching, through my one-on-one speaking engagement, all those things. So the book is just another tool, right, that I can leverage in the toolbox. But it's the storytelling aspect of it. It's the additional context that you share when you're in person with someone, or again, doing podcasts like this that make the words on the page just come to life in a totally different way. So I would say just, again, like, give what you know and acknowledge that there's a whole lot out there that you still don't know. And that's just the path to the next book, right?
Yeah. And I think the subtitle for this of turning expertise into actionable impact is perfect for what we're talking about, because it really is putting our expertise in there and leading the people, right? Like, it's the whole adage, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's the same thing, I feel like, with this, where you can lead people to the information and the conclusions that you want and the takeaways that you want them to have. But that doesn't mean that they're going to experience in the same way that you intended it. And at the end of the day, they may not take action, or maybe they do. Like, that's like, I think that's sometimes the hard part of being an author, is that we have all these hopes, because it's like, okay, I know if you just follow these steps or do this thing, like, I know that what you're aiming for, that transformation that you want, is possible. And at the same time, things happen, and that doesn't always end up the way that we want it to.
Yeah. Jen, I'll say 2 things to that. One, I've learned along the way of doing a lot of mentorship programming that I used to just, again, with a lot of passion, I would just be like, all right, so this is what you need to do to set yourself up for success. And what I learned was, like, people are more receptive to you giving them things to consider versus telling them what to do. And so a lot of times in like my training and even in like the books, it's like, consider this, right? Like, as I write articles, even for like LinkedIn, I'll say like, consider these tips on managing up. I'm not telling you to do these 5 things. Because again, in great mentorship, oftentimes the research will say, like, it's somebody who met me where I was and journeyed alongside of me, sharing stories and insights, but empowering me to sort of think about what was in the right context for me. What was I going to do based on my values, my goals, etc. So I think the same plays out in this case if you take on that mindset.
Yeah, because I think that a good book doesn't bark direct instructions at you.
Yeah.
I think what readers are looking for, or anyone is looking for, like in that transformation, especially in speaking, is that the audience wants to know that you've been where they are. So they want to hear the raw, gritty, not so pretty side of things. So if you're just kind of showing up as this expert, back to what we were saying before, this expert that is just so polished, so precise, so perfect, it feels so inauthentic simply because it's not a day-to-day reality for us. We want the person to say, yeah, I really screwed up all of these things. Like I screwed up my first book or my first business or my first program or whatever the thing is. Like people want to see like, oh yeah, by the way, that person is human. Like it's really like it could, because then if seeing like, wow, you're super successful. And I can see that, wow, you also had those same bumps in the road. It's like, okay, yeah. I can do it too. It makes it much more realistic that I can do it, versus me thinking that you're perfect out of the gate.
Yeah. And it goes back to your point about authenticity, right? Like when we lead with those imperfections and talk about what we learned navigating our way through them, it's what makes us resonate more with people. It's what casts our net wider to a bigger audience because people can hear that and start to see themselves in it. And I think that's, again, what makes a great author and what makes a great speaker is when you lead with those types of stories. One of our clients, I was just doing a graduation program with them, and we had one of the senior leaders who's been with the company for 36 years agreed to give us time as part of one of the segments. And, you have people who are like the handlers, right, that are guiding the process until the point of action. And so the handlers all along are like, all the questions need to be approved and we need to screen how you're going to introduce each question, all this stuff. And then he arrives in the room and he was like the complete opposite of that. He's like, I'm sure people have told you what you can and can ask me, but anything's on the table. I'm an open book. Like, just let's lean into it, right? And he did. He was super vulnerable. He shared all sorts of experiences that he had navigating his way through COVID and his mental health journey, things that just like a lot of senior leaders are not typically open about talking about. And as a result, that 30 minutes turned into about an hour and 20 minutes. He stayed with the team and like just took questions from all of the early career talent that was there. That's what I think, again, if it's as an author or as a speaker, it's like, give people your heart and your mind and it'll spark curiosity and connection with them. And that's what enables you to keep growing and keep being, better and better at your craft.
Yeah, and that's such a good leadership. That's such a good example of leading by example. Yeah. And I wonder, like, do you think that they're like the perception, right, of dealing with the handlers of here's all the parameters that you can and cannot do versus had that not been the case, do you think that you almost need that like contrast to be like, oh, hey, this is what all the handlers were saying versus how I show up? Or do you think if they just showed up as a humble person, it would have had the same effect?
My gut reaction, honestly, is that, and I see this a lot in our work, I think that like it's a system that exists without question. And I think that, again, as authors, we have an opportunity in the words we put on a page and in the breath we give to those words in live experiences like this to challenge systems and to, push through the status quo to show people that there's another way. So it goes back to your question. Like if someone's listening to this and it's like, you've had the book in your mind for years and you haven't yet started it, like this is your call to action to start it, to push through the noise, to push through the status quo and to breathe life into your truth, because that's the thing, again, that someone else is looking for.
Yeah.
Almost as a way to give yourself and them permission to live with authenticity, right? Like, I think that's one of the highest callings that all of us can get to.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that so much of this is also about values, right? It's about what do we value as a person? What does our organization value? What is our company, our culture, all the things? Because I think when we have the alignment of the authenticity with the values, with the humbleness or lack of ego being involved, I think we can just really show up as ourselves. And I think that's especially from a leadership standpoint, people are expecting you, like it's almost like there's this expectation that you'll be a certain way. And when you kind of like throw them off, it's almost like, oh wow, like they're human too. And now I trust them more, or now maybe I respect their leadership more. And I would imagine from an employer-employee standpoint, you could probably get more out of your people when they feel like they're being heard, because you're showing them that you're listening to them at the very least.
Yeah. I say this Maya Angelou quote a lot, which is, people forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And so I think as like an author, as a speaker, you have to challenge yourself to say, what do I want people to think, feel, and or do as a result of their experience with me? Whether that experience is in picking up my book or in listening to this conversation or seeing me speak. It's like, I'm very intentional, and I would encourage others to really be intentional with how you live your values through those actions, right? In the way that you make people feel.
Yeah. And it's like even the title, like the book is a vehicle, like it's one piece of such a bigger ecosystem, and we're impacting people in all of these different points in the ecosystem. And I feel like congruency is so important here. And I feel like that's the thing that I wish more people talked about, because, like if you're, like you're so open and welcoming and personable, and you're here to, like you're obviously like here and ready to provide tips, but if your writing is like cold and jaded, there's going to be that mismatch, and people are like, why would I hire him to come speak on my stage? So like it's almost like our spoken word and our written word have to match. And I think a lot of times the advice from a writing standpoint is, it's beaten into us in high school, college, graduate school, whatever the case may be, that you have to write a certain way. And that certain way is very formal and very academic. And the reality is that nobody wants to read that. Like nobody's looking for academic writing. Even if you are, so it's almost like you kind of like untrain yourself, because academic writing is by nature very kind of cold and not really friendly, because it's less of you. And so I think that trying to find that congruency is so important. I feel like you've gotten that figured out really well.
Well, I mean, it's also just by like I always joke, like there's certain like quote unquote mentors that I've had that I've never met before, but I follow their example and I really lean into what, their own coaching. Brene Brown is an example of that, where, she took what is traditionally, to your point, like a research related career pathway and said, like, what is the point of all this research if the everyday person doesn't understand it? Yep. So how can I translate it in a way that helps people use it in the decisions that they're making or the actions that they're taking? And again, that's the way I try to think of, if you give me 60 minutes on your stage, I'm only going to be able to deliver so much. But to your point about, I can give you the book as like, here's the rest of it, right? Like then it all works together. And I think that again, it's, if you're really clear with your why, like I think of somebody like Brene, it's like, she has been much more clear with like, I've learned all these things and I want to share it with the world so that we can get out of our own way and put the best of ourselves forward. Yeah. I like agree with that. Like I want to do that too in the work that I do.
Yeah. And I guess as we're kind of like circling here, wrapping, when you think about your work, what's the, I guess maybe for like your existing books, like what's the best thing someone came up to you and said after reading your book, or the best email or voice memo or whatever it might be?
I mean, the best is a young leader that I was mentoring told me that he's used it as the pocket guide. He's like, I keep it with me everywhere I go. He's like, I have notes in all the different sections, because the way that I wrote it, there's like 20 some different chapters, and each chapter has sort of calls to action and reflection questions that you can kind of reflect on in real time. And he was saying, like, I had a difficult conversation with my manager. I flipped to that section. I looked through the framework that you suggested, and then I wrote down like the notes on how I would approach the conversation. And so to me, it's like you were really using it. And I think there's a difference between I can consume something and I can really use it. Yeah. And again, it goes back to, what do you want people to think, feel, or do as a result of your book? I want people to leverage the different tools and tactics that are in there. And I invite people to share with me additional things that they have found to be effective in their own practice, so that we can all, again, keep learning together. So I think that's like probably what's one of my favorite tips. The other is I had another young leader who took it and was like, my roommate like quietly was trying to like read it in between me reading it. And so finally she was like, I just gave it to her. And I'm like, okay, I'll send you another copy. Like,
that is awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like that is the best, and especially like this is like there's like compounding effects here because you're also writing for young people, which is a whole other can of worms in terms of how to write, how to market, and actually get them to engage. Because I feel like a lot of young people are just like books is not their preferred method for learning, and so the fact that you have like this someone who's sneaking in trying to read someone else's book, like that is like such a huge compliment.
Yeah. It's funny. I was on a session the other day with a mental health coach that we work with, and she was talking about this year, one of her themes is going analog, just in terms of just trying to manage like all the doom scrolling and sort of social influence. And it's funny because like I do see people sort of reverting back to like, I mean, I'm old fashioned too. Like I like the notebook and pen. I like the book in print. And so I think that you're going to start to see more people leaning in that direction.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I would encourage, any author to do is how can you build connection and community through your books? So like whether, it's traditional like book clubs or just like things like this, where you are creating a stronger sense of community where people can respond and chat through it. Like people are craving that, especially a lot of early career talent. And so if you can help facilitate that, it will make you even more influential and give you the insights you need to continue growing, your craft.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the pendulum has absolutely swung, and I think COVID just kind of like was an accelerant to, I think the burnout and fatigue that young people even are having with being, available all the time and accessible all the time. Like I think the mental health kind of component is almost like catching up with people where like people are like, I gotta take a step back. And I remember when like the internet marketing was like really kind of like on the rise. And I'm like, at some point it's going to plateau and then it's going to drop off a cliff. It's taken a while, but I think we're here. I personally got a flip phone this year and my friends are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, listen, I don't want to be accessible all the time. Like I obviously still have my smartphone, but like I want to be able to pick the smartphone up when I want to use it, not having like, and I don't have any notifications. The thing, I haven't heard a sound from it in God knows how long, but like it just makes me feel kind of more comfortable. And I'm also like a notebook and a pen type of gal. So like, I totally get that. And I think it's going to be exciting to kind of see like how these trends shake out, because like as thought leaders and authors, and we're going to have to figure out how to kind of like move with what's happening. And I think like in-person engagements, it feels like, that's definitely kind of like starting to come back around, because it was like so long lost, it felt like. And it's like, now, but with that said, or I should say, and they have to be good engagements. You can't get away with just doing some like bullshit half-ass type of engagement anymore, where before I think you could slap together a very simple networking event and you'd have tons of people show up. I don't think people are very precious with their time, as they should be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a friend who is a musician and a photographer. And, several months ago, I was talking with him and I was like, and he's like a really good storyteller, has really good energy. He can sort of spark a conversation with anyone. And I said to him, your two means of communication through your music and through photography tend to be very like one directional, right? Like I go to a gallery and I'm looking at a photo, or I'm going to a concert and I'm listening to music. And I said, what if you were to create, and I've worked with him, we actually just piloted it a few weeks ago, an experience where you use your music and photography as a means to spark conversation with a live audience. And it's all sort of unfolding in real time, and you kind of lean into sort of the improv nature of it. So you're sharing stories, but you're inviting your audience to lean in and say, like, what would they do in those moments? And it was really powerful. And the feedback was incredible from the participants, because again, it was unexpected. He started playing the piano and made a mistake right off the bat on purpose, because he's like, look, I'm putting it out there that like, we are all capable of making mistakes and moving on. Right? Like, and this is all about just learning together and talking, to your point earlier, about not just the things that we're grateful for and that we've achieved, but also the challenges that we've been navigating or currently are. And again, I saw so much reflection in the chat that people were like, oh my God, I'm loving this format. I'm loving that like all these people in the session are sharing their own lived experiences. You're inviting that into the conversation. So I think as authors, like we all have an opportunity to do that.
And it's almost like the age of creativity is upon us. Like I think that we've been all kind of, sounds awful, but I think of like a meat packing plant where we're all just kind of like the cattle that's like just slowly entering the slaughterhouse, just following the same noise without any sense of like clarity or direction, because it's like, oh well, the herd's moving this way, we may as well move this way too. But I think that like people are just woken up that like this, it doesn't have to be this way. And I think that's such a beautiful thing because I love that, you know, kind of like the improv style, because it's almost like a comedian who does really good crowd work. I think crowd work is such a skill. And so it's like, I would much prefer going to that versus a concert. I think that'd be so much fun. And so like, how can more people be more creative in that way? And like, just have the permission to feel like, I don't have to do this kind of homogenous, massive way of doing it. I can just do however it works for me and see what happens. Experiment.
Yeah. And something tactical that I'll challenge like everyone to do. I try to do this myself and it's really helped a lot, which is we tend to, again, in the spirit of perfection over progress, we tend to sort of focus our time and attention towards what we see as perfection, right? Like the people that are achieving success, that are winning all the awards, that are rising to the tops of the charts. And we constantly are comparing ourselves to them versus looking for the people around us in our everyday living that are standing out, that are doing something that is that like, everyone's going that way and this person is going over here. And instead of labeling that weird or strange, label it like really interesting and lean in with your curiosity to understand like what's the impact of that choice. A simple example would be like at Coachella with, you know, Justin Bieber doing something completely like stripped down and raw compared to everyone else sort of overproducing, over engineering, right, for their quote unquote ideal of perfection. He was the one everyone was talking about. Right. And so you can be that person if you break away from the conformity and say to yourself, what's the sort of rawest, truest form of you and your story and what you've learned so far. And whether you put that in writing in your book or you breathe life into it through these experiences or both, like that's where you're going to start to build an audience of people who find real value in what you have to offer.
And that's the easier way to do it. Like when we're not trying to be perfect, it's so much easier, right? Like even like in the prep of this conversation, I was like, well, here's some bullet points and let's try, like, we'll try to get to them, but if we don't, who cares? Because I think that, you know, like you listen to podcasts that are very like rote where it's like, it's this question, then this question. And it's like, it's just, I don't know. It's a little bit boring and it feels overproduced. I would rather just hit record and hope for the best, which, you know, maybe that's not the best strategy for someone else, but like it works for me. And I make sure that I bring on people who can also kind of follow that flow. Because I certainly don't want to put anybody in an awkward position where they're feeling, you know, ambushed because I'm going rogue, but you know, I think it's more authentic that way. And I would much prefer to be in kind of that place of authenticity for myself to just kind of like, I know that I do better off the cuff. So I know not to do anything scripted. It's just kind of like what I know about myself. So I think that's part of this too, is like really just spending time to see like how you show up and what feels good for you, to then identify where are the places and what are those avenues of creativity that might work for you instead of following the herd.
Absolutely. And Jen, what you're really good at is active listening. And I would say like being fully present is one of the best superpowers that anyone listening to this can develop and really build the muscle of. It's not something that necessarily always comes naturally to everyone. So really being intentional with being fully present, observing, actively listening, you'll see and hear so much that you maybe were missing all along, right? Because again, we're chasing something that we feel like is what we should be doing versus being present in the conversation and allowing it to flow naturally. I do the same thing when I'm like interviewing, you know, senior leaders at companies. And it's so funny because so often they're like, this was so different than like any other like fireside chat Q&A that I've ever had. And I always kick those things off with like a speed round of introductory questions that are human to human, right? It's just like, I don't care about your title or how long you've been here in terms of your tenure. What I care about is, you know, things like what's a book, podcast, or movie that's really drawn you in recently? If you had a blank thank you note, who would you write it to and why? And those are the questions, those are the reflections that make us human. And that, again, as an author, if you can build that connection, then you can take them on a journey.
Yeah. And your book, like that's the beautiful thing about a book. You got a whole lot of pages you can fill that kind of take them on that journey when you really think through what's the journey I want to take them on.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love this. I could talk to you all day. I feel like you're just so easy to talk to and always so generous with your information.
Oh, thanks so much, Jen. Yeah, I mean, I love doing this and certainly, you know, welcome anyone out there. As you can see, I'm an open book. So anything I've learned along the way, I'm definitely happy to share. Yeah.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can reach out, Daniel at CoLabL.com, or you could just check out our website, CoLabL.com, CoLabL.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for